Hello and welcome to Digital Combat Simulator, DCS for short. You join me here today at Andersen Air Force Base, where we will be demonstrating rearming and refueling procedures, as well as using the communications menu to request startup, taxiing, and takeoff. Feel free to pause anytime through this video as you follow along with me. I am your host Cobra Chicken, and please subscribe to get notified for new videos as they're published. Thank you, and let's get started. So in front of us we have the F-15C Eagle, one of the best air-to-air fighters ever made. Let's hop in the cockpit and we will get started. Alright, so we're now in the cockpit, and I will go ahead and press the Shift and L button at the same time. That's Shift L, and we have our onboard power. We will then use the backslash key, and that will pull up the communications dialog menu at the top right of your screen, and that is top right of your screen. And from there we will press F8, and F8 will bring up your ground crew menu. We will then press F1, where we can rearm and refuel. We'll cover this in a later video, but for now let's just go ahead and use the communications menu to request startup. So again, backslash, and then we will go to F5, which is our air traffic control, ATC. And then we will go Andersen Air Force Base, which is F1, and F3 to request startup.
Forward 4-1, request startup.
As you can hear, we've just requested startup.
Forward 1, cleared for startup. Wind 227 at 3 meters per second.
And our Air Force Base air traffic control has now responded with authorization to start up our aircraft. Now we will zoom in here to the bottom right of our cockpit, and we will look at the dash. What we will be looking for is the RPM gauge. There are two RPM gauges. This one on the left will govern our left engine, and this one on the right will govern our right engine. Below that we have our temperature gauges, and please note that each number, so like for example the 2 is actually 200 degrees, 4 is 400 degrees, and onwards and onwards. This one on the left governs the left engine, and this one on the right governs the right engine. We also have our fuel flow gauges right below that. Below the fuel flow gauges we have our nozzle position indicators, and those ones will dictate the positions that are engine nozzles. So at the rear of the aircraft, it will dictate what position they're in. These are effective when we are in afterburner, as we can actually see just how much afterburner we are at. To the right of that we have our fuel quantity gauge, which tells us how much fuel is in the aircraft. As of right now we have about 13,450 pounds of fuel on board. Alright, so we've requested for startup already as through that dialog menu. So now you will go ahead and press your Alt, this is your right Alt and home button momentarily, and that will start your left engine. So that's right Alt home will start your left engine. As you can see, my RPM begins to spool up, and by engine temperature on my left engine begins to rise as well. We will let that spool up. As you can see, our fuel flow to our left engine has also started as well, and our oil pressure, not oil temperature, oil pressure. Alright, now we've our RPMs have settled at 67% RPM on our left engine, which means that our left engine has completely started. we can now go ahead and start our right engine. So in order to start our right engine, we will be doing right control and home. Right control and home, and that gets our right engine started. Now you can take a look here and see that at our left engine start, our engine temperature has stabilized at 500 degrees centigrade. You can see here our right engine temperature is rising as well, and it should stabilize momentarily. Fuel flow is rising, so that ought to rise up to around 1400 pounds per hour. Alright, and with that, our engines have started up. So if we actually go to the exterior view, that's F2 for exterior view, you can it's hard to tell, but sometimes you can get a clear view of the actual engine rotating, and that's another way you can tell that you've started up your engines. Alright, so we've gone ahead and we've started up our engines. The next step, now that we've got our engines started, is we will close our canopy. So the canopy is right above us. I will switch over to external view just so you can see the canopy better. And we will press right control and C, and that will close our canopy. Alright, so right control plus C opens up the canopy as well. We will hop on into the aircraft just so you can get a better view of that from inside the aircraft. Right control C and your canopy closes. Alright, now that we've got our engine started up, we will now request taxi to runway from our air traffic control. So again, we will go back to backslash, back to the ATC F5. We will go to the Air Force Base, Anderson Air Force Base, which is the runway we're currently on, and we will now request taxi to runway.
Forward 4-1, request taxi to runway.
Okay, we've requested taxi to runway.
Forward 1, clear to taxi to runway 6.
And we've been cleared to taxi to runway 6 left. Now, an easy way of telling which runway you've been cleared to is you can actually use the map function, which is F10, and you can look at which runway it is that you've been cleared to. I've been cleared to runway 6L, which, as you can see, 06L, that's the runway I've been cleared to. And you can see your parking position, so I'm all the way on the end, which means I'll have to take a right, go to the end of the taxiway, take another right, and I'll be at the threshold of my runway. We'll go back into the internal view of the aircraft, back with F1, and we will get started, and we will actually taxi to the runway. All right, so just with a little throttle input, you will get the aircraft rolling. And when you're on the ground, try to use your pedals. So I will use the X and Z keys on my keyboard to control my pedal input. So just a little bit of fuel, get us on a steady path, steady, slow speed. Alright, now we have just reached the threshold of the runway, so we are going to go ahead and we are going to request takeoff. So we're going to hold, and we're going to go to our dialog menu with our backslash F1, and we're going to wait.
Forward 1, you are cleared for takeoff when ready. Climb 300 at QFE 29.35.
Alright, we have just received a authorization for takeoff. We are cleared. Now before I take off, it is very important that I have my aircraft in a takeoff configuration. So as you can see down here, we need to set our flaps into the takeoff position. So we will use our F key. And now we have flaps down, and that means our aircraft is ready for takeoff. We can take a look outside and we can see that our flaps are in the down position. And we can go ahead and line up with the runway. And usually what you want to do is you want to go right up to the number and line up with the runway. There we go. We're nice and lined up, and we are ready for takeoff. Now, you will then hold down your wheel brakes with the W key, increase your RPM to 80%, and then at 80% you will then release your wheel brakes and you will go into full throttle. Now when you reach around 120, you will then start to pull back, and there you go. You will then bring up your gear and your flaps at the same time. If I can give you an external view, your gear and your flaps are now up, and as you can see, I am in afterburner. And how I can tell I am in afterburner is my nozzle position is now at 100%. And that's all there is to take off in the F-15C.